the dial, turn it loud. Miami's pride, make us proud. CanesWear crew, you hear the crowd. Hurricanes ain't backing down. Every play, every score, raising bets and raising roar. Rocking orange, green galore. All for one and one for four. We got FTSN, taking names, winning again. Podcast fam, till the end. Tune in, now let's begin.
What is going on, Canes fans? I am your host, Brad Tejeda, again with another great episode of the CanesWear Daily Podcast, only on the FTSN Network. Make sure you Cane fans hit that like and subscribe button. And as y'all know, we've had a loaded show this week with our live show we always do every Tuesday night with Brett and the boys. Yesterday, we had our guy Gio Melion talk a little bit of recruiting and transfer portal possible targets in the future. And today, as we get geared up this weekend, this Saturday, noon game, last home game of the season for our seniors in the Miami Hurricanes and our Heisman candidate Cam Ward in the Hard Rock Stadium. We're going to be facing an opposing team, the Wake Forest DemonDeacons, and we can't have none other than our guy Cam Lemons, 24/7 writer of the DemonDecanDigest, join us today and break down this Wake Forest team. Cam, thank you so much for joining us today, man.
Thanks for having me. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Cannot complain. You know, as we know, Miami just was on a bye this past weekend. And before that week, we had a lot of fans complaining because we got our first loss of the season to Georgia Tech, a team that we are definitely favored in going to the matchup, very similar to this one this weekend. But as we know, in the realm of college football, Cam, anything can happen. So I'll be holding my breath, especially on this defensive side of the ball, when we break down some of the strengths for your Wake Forest team. Really seems to be a lot of favorable matchups when you look at the opposing defense for Miami and some of our weaknesses. But let's get right to it, man. You guys are 4-6. Before we break down specific players, you know, you guys have had a coach that's been there for quite a while, right? You got a quarterback that's gone around to a couple other programs. This is now his third program in, I believe, 5 or 6 years at quarterback, and Hank Backmeyer. And then you also got an elite running back as well. But before we talk about those guys, what has been the overall picture and expectations before the season for Wake Forest and kind of how the season has played out? Because I know with Miami, we've been in a lot of close games and yet we pulled it out. And I know Wake Forest has been in a lot of close ones as well and been on the opposite end.
Yeah, I mean, the barometer for this year was making a bowl. You know, after last year's disaster was really the only way to put it. You know, there was a want to get back to a sense of normalcy, and a lot of what the problem felt like it was inexperience and just not good enough at quarterback. And so what they did this last offseason was essentially run it back. They say, look, we're not going to make a ton of changes in terms of the coaching staff. They ended up bringing in a decent amount of analysts that have been filling in some different voids here and there. But they wanted to retain a healthy amount of their roster of their starters and key reserves. They wanted to go out and get a transfer portal quarterback that has been around the block a little bit. And they wanted to make an emphasis and say, hey, you know, what happened last year wasn't us. And I think you can say that it did and it didn't work. I think you can say it did work because last year, and Dave Clawson talked about it, you know, this week during his press conference, you wouldn't have been able to bet most games Wake Forest would be able to score 10 to 14 points. This year, you know, they're scoring just a tick under 30, and that's with them shooting themselves in the foot every 5 seconds, whether it's penalties, it's a turnover, you know, just someone drops the ball. Like, even with all these miscues, Wake is still putting up about 30 points a game. And that's just a stark difference from last year, where they just felt like, you know, down and down, they were fine, but they really couldn't do anything with the ball. So, you know, they've gone back to some sense of a normalcy on offense. But I think you can say it didn't work because, one, there's been just the players talking about this turnovers and penalties and drop balls. It's not just your guys like a Mike Mays who's in his second year, or a guy like Deuce Alexander that's in his second year. There's guys like Donovan Green who's been around for 5-6 years. It's Devontae Gordon who's been around 5-6 years. It's Taylor Marin that's been around for 5-6 years. Hank Bachmeyer, you know, he's been fine but not spectacular. And so you decided to run it back, and you have all of these experienced pieces, but those experienced guys are the ones that are it's 1st and 10 from the 24, and bam, false start or illegal procedure. And this, so that's where it's been a bit hard right now just to kind of figure out, you know, what's been the root cause of that. And so it's definitely caused a bit of angst amongst the Wake Forest faithful, I would say.
And it's interesting too, right? Because you talk about some of the miscues and mishaps, just the simple penalties or just not catching the football and key situations. One of the things with Wake Forest, especially in the past and even currently on the roster, is Wake Forest relies a lot on their veteran leadership, right? Having a lot of guys that played a lot of football or been in the program for 4 or 5+ years, right? And you guys still have that this year, right? But to your point, it just seems like there's still a lot of miscues in that direction. And looking at your schedule, very similar to some of Miami's wins compared to Wake Forest losses this year. Most of them, besides Clemson, is a 1-possession game, right? It's 7 points or less with a lot of these losses that end up coming with a Wake Forest. I mean, you talk about some losses like Cal and North Carolina, but then you have other losses like to Louisiana, and I'm not talking about LSU, right? And a team like Virginia. What do you think has been the main reason for those, close calls as far as not getting, that one more possession and getting those wins?
I think it really depends on the game. If you looked earlier in the season when it came down to the UVA game, for example, a guy in Taylor Morin, like I named, who's in his 6th year of college football, fumbles the ball, and Donovan Green, who's in his 5th year of football, decides to not only try to pick it up and run with it, but then just doesn't get the ball in general. Someone else swoops on it. That's the game right there. A game like Louisiana, Wake Forest is down 1 billion corners, which has been a really big problem for them all year, health and consistency at corner. And, Louisiana, I know they're in the driver's seat to go to the Sun Belt Championship. They've been a really good team this year, but the fact that you keep having these miscommunications in the back end and you're allowing 50, 40 yards, just miscommunications on the back end, that's a problem. And then you kind of fast forward to a game like UNC, for example, from last week, where, Wake's defense, which has been not great all year, and that's putting it lightly, the yards they give to Martin Hampton was not good at all. But down, they stopped UNC pretty well. They forced turnovers. They got stops in general, but they had a little bit of inconsistent play with Hank Bachmeier. The first play of the game of the second half, he goes down. Michael Kern comes in, and they go down the field, get a touchdown. But then the rest of the drives Michael Kern has, he has a pick six, a pick to a receiver that ran the wrong route, and then a sack strip. And so now it's like, okay, well, the defense finally shows up, and they just haven't been able to put together a 60-minute game. And that's been problematic because, if you looked at a normal year and someone goes 3-3 in one-score games, which I'm pretty sure it's a record right now in one-score games, you're like, wow, that's, they could have had a couple more. They should have lost a couple more. So 3-3 is probably where the math says that should be. But it's just kind of frustrating because it's lack of attention to detail. It's guys trying to do too much, honestly, to a certain point. I think that's probably the big thing. I think in UVA and in the Cal game and in UNC, you see guys trying to do too much instead of living to fight for another down.
Some of the things that you said about Wake Forest and some of the key losses, and of course, Miami having a guy like Cam Ward and the, poison of the offense, whether it's running or passing the ball, having the number 1 offense in the country, has really helped us with some of the same reasons why you just explained you were on the losing part of it. And our defense, again, is having the same issues that you just talked about: communication, the simple things, doing too much, or just not knowing your assignment. And, this is a team where usually each and every week when you go on X or when you're on the media boards or on Twitter Spaces, most of the time this fan base, it's either stop the run or stop the pass, right? But for some reason with this Wake Forest team, it's stop the slow mesh, right? And because we know how deficit our defense in the weak spots as Miami fans, one of the first glaring things that we see as football fans when we turn on the tape of Wake Forest is that slow mesh concept. Do you run it all the time? Is that your bread and butter? No, by any means necessary. But that is one thing that y'all definitely use in your offense, and it's something that has been hurting this Miami defense week in and week out. Tell me, and all the fans that are listening, tuned in, exactly why the slow mesh works on a team like Miami and others, and also some of the other key components that you think is really going to help a team like Wake Forest stay in this football game.
I think one of the reasons the slow mesh works is the fact that we talk so much about it, and it's maybe 15 to 20% of the playbook for Wake Forest. And it's one of those really funny / frustrating things when I'm watching TV, when I'm watching the game back, or I can't cover it live, and I hear an announcer go, "Oh, there's another slow mesh," and I go, "The dude didn't walk forward. It was just an RPO. I don't really know what we're doing right now." But I think it's one of those things that like you said, it's a unique thing. You don't ever really see in an elongated mesh point. You don't see someone putting the ball in the running back's hand, taking 2-3 steps forward. And what that does is, I don't think linebacker play across the NFL right now is all that great. I think there's a group of 5 to 6 guys in the NFL that are really good, and the rest of them, like, some of you are run guys, some of you are pass guys, you're not both. And that trickles down to college football when I go, oh, wow, okay, so slow mesh is designed to attack some linebackers. Oh, buddy, if you've got I've got a group of guys that are kind of been all over the place, it's one of the best examples for them to say, hey, if you're going to be in purgatory, you're going to have to figure this out on the fly. And I think that's been a big thing for them over the last few years, is saying, you know what, we understand linebacker play isn't exactly perfect across college football. Let's see what we can do to put you guys in weird spots. Now, I think Miami's in an interesting place to defend the slow mesh for the simple fact of what they have on defense. The best way to defend the slow mesh isn't by your safeties or by your linebackers doing a great job. You're blowing up the A gap. And I think with Simeon Barrow, with a guy I'm don't know why I'm thinking about
Ruben Bain, Mesidor.
Yeah, like you've got like a ton of Ruben Bain can kind of stunt if he wants to. They don't really need him to stunt, but if he wanted to, he could kind of come in on the inside and be just fine. And so, but there's a lot of guys on that defensive line for Miami that are going to try to cause havoc. So that way, because I know Miami's out here trying to run a freshman cornerback who's playing very well. But I think when Wake Forest is going to go into this game saying, hey, we might not need explosive plays, but let's see if we can go down to down to down. It's a real fun match to see what wins first, either a really good defensive line against Wake's offensive line, or do the linebackers get just kind of put in hell and just not be able to stop, an 8-10 yard route behind them.
Now, one of the reasons why the slow mesh works so well is you got to have an elite running back and someone that can really test that secondary and second unit of the linebackers, right, and be able to break not just one tackle, but create distance and really take it all the way. And you guys have one just in that, in Damon Claiborne, who's really the guy that goes through your offense, right? There's no doubt about it when you turn on the tape. This guy has almost 1,000 rushing yards, already 10 or 11 plus touchdowns. And when you look at this Miami's defense, every single week, it seems like at least once there's a long broken run play on this defense. And that is kind of the bread and butter for Wake Forest and what Damon Claiborne brings to y'all's element on the offense. Talk a little bit about how great Claiborne has been for Wake Forest and kind of why he brings such a mismatch to defenses, especially at linebackers, not only being able to run the ball, but be able to put him in motion, slide him out, wide to the outside, and be able to create that mismatch opportunity.
I'm kind of glad you brought that bringing out wide, because Wake has done a lot of 5 wide recently. They really started trusting more with protection, and sometimes it'll burn them, but they've really decided, hey, if you guys want to come at us, we have a guy that can catch the ball right here. But Demond is special. I think when we recruited him, and he's, I think, a top 5 recruit in Wake Forest history, and everyone kind of thought, hey, this guy has all the tools. Let's see what happens year 1, year 2, year 3. And, his first year here, his first couple of years, he was good obviously at running the football, but was just a net negative in pass blocking. And so it's hard to put a running back out there if you can't block. It just really is. This year, he's put together some really, really impressive pass blocking tape, and it's made them more comfortable saying, hey, here's the ball for 25 to 30 times, whether that's, 20 catches and 5 targets, 25 rushes, 5 targets, whatever the split may be. I think the moment we found out he was special was the Louisiana game, where it was late in the second quarter. He dislocated his knee. We thought, oh no, that's just, the season is just done. The best player on your team just got hurt, dislocated his knee, he's done. Then he comes out after halftime and is running out on the sideline. We're like, this dude's knee was the wrong way about 10 minutes ago. What's going on? And in Wake's first drive of the second half, he burst off like a 50-plus yard touchdown on the ground. And we're like, you're just a freak of nature at that point. I don't care that was against Louisiana. Anyone that can come back from a dislocated kneecap in the same game and go run a touchdown, you're cool with me. But I think you see the home run plays, then I think that's what excites you about Damon. But the big thing about him is it's really hard to get him for negative or even like 0 to 2 yards. Like every time you see a run from him, it's 4 yards, it's 5 yards, it's 4 yards. Like he's going to keep you on schedule. And he doesn't seem like he's that strong because he's not exactly the biggest person, but he's always fighting forward. He's always falling forward. And I think that's been really, really helpful, at least when Wake's, they want to run the ball. They wanted to establish run every single game. They've tried to do their best with it. And DeMond's going to get the ball and he's going to do something good with it.
Now, before we flip to the defensive side of the ball for Wake Forest, are there any other guys on the offensive side of the football that you are looking for as a key matchup going into this game, whether it's, one of the offensive linemen going in up against a guy like Ruben Bain, or, if you're wanting to test that secondary, not just with a running back in Claiborne, who's that one guy that you're really circling for Wake Forest that if you guys are going to get this W, it's not going to just be Claiborne, it's going to be this other person?
I think Donovan Green's probably the guy I'm circling. Another guy like Claiborne, he was one of the most highly rated recruits in Wake Forest history. He's dealt with injury issues throughout his entire career, missed about 6 to 7 games this year with a hamstring injury. They basically held him out and say, look, we need you down the stretch. Let's just make sure you're healthy. And when he came back against Cal, everyone was like, okay, cool. He made some plays. I was like, this is the guy that we've recruited. And last week against UNC, he got free a few times, had a ball kind of knocked out of his hand that he probably shouldn't have. Gave up on a route that he really shouldn't have, dropped the ball he shouldn't have. It was just a really rough game for Donovan. And I think he's someone that ends up getting matched up on a true freshman just to say, hey, look, you've got the speed, you've got the athleticism. Let's see what you can do one-on-one. And I don't think it's really mattered who he's gone up against, whether it's Louisiana or a UVA or Cal. And I think Cal has one of the best secondaries in the country. He's going to get open. He's got that. He's just a freak of nature with that type of speed and that strength. And I think Wake's going to probably look towards him to say, look, and challenge him after that game on Saturday and say, hey, you had a bad game. And we need you in a game like this to really stretch the field and be able to open up some lanes for DeMond. So that way they can't just sit here and just run a 4-man front, or worse, be in a bear front and just say, you're not going to run the ball on us. Eventually you've got to be able to pass the ball.
Now, speaking of passing the ball, obviously Miami's offense, like I mentioned before, having a Heisman candidate guy in Cam Ward and the number 1 offense in the country, have no issues passing the football. But when you look at Wake Forest's defense, it's a little odd and interesting to me especially right off the bat, when you check out the box score. Your leading tackler and interceptions on the team is a guy in the secondary by the name of Nick Anderson. And I don't think I've ever seen in a while a guy that still has a couple games left in the regular season, and then they already have over 100 plus tackles in one season, especially at the secondary. And then when you look behind him, you've got 3 or 4 guys that are all floating around that 50 to 70, 80 range of tackles as well, compared to a Miami team where our leading tackler and Kiko Manoa only has 56 tackles, right? So talk a little bit about kind of the tenacity of what Wake Forest's defense brings to the table and literally having a bunch of guys that just fly to the football.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of the style you see with a cover 3 defense. That's what Brad Lambert loves to do. I know it's the style that Alabama runs as well, is they understand that they have their deficiencies at corner. They fully understand it. And so what they want to do is both in the run game and the pass game is say, look, if you're especially in the pass game, look, we'll play a little bit off. We'll give you your 6 to 7 yards, but they want their corners and their safeties to be able to tackle. And if you can't make that first tackle, you sure as heck better be able to slow them down so someone can come in and finish the job. That's supposed to be sort of the style that they want to do. They want to eliminate the big plays. They want to eliminate those miscommunications. And you've seen that against Stanford. We've seen that in the second half against Cal. We've seen that in a game like NC State where, the yardage starts to stack up, but you see a lot of guys making those tackles. And you have a guy like Nick Anderson. They love making their safeties play by the box. Nick Anderson, Devon Patterson, Evan Slocum. You'll see all of those guys around the box. Now, some injuries have definitely hurt them, especially at corner. And I think this is a game where if Cam Ward wants to really get back into like the discussion, and I think he's in the discussion, really vault his way back to a top 2, top 3 candidate for the Heisman, this is a great opportunity for him because Wake's been dealing with issues at corner because Jamari Glasker has been dealing with an ankle injury. Sounds like he's going to be back on Saturday. They got a transfer in Capone Blue from Kent State, who was playing, kind of here and there. Had to medically retire after an injury he suffered in the UConn game. They brought up Sedarius Kelly, who was a transfer, and he's been playing some really good ball. I've actually been really impressed with him, but he's missed, a few games here and there with injuries. And so they've been at the point of having to play a Jackson Mole, who was a former walk-on at Purdue outside, and Zamari Stevenson, who is, used to be a nickel. And for those who don't really know the ins and outs, a corner isn't just a corner. You playing nickel and you playing outside are just two completely different worlds, two completely different leverages. And so the dude was playing nickel for them as of mid-October, and now is having to go back and learn how to play an outside corner. And so there's been some deficiencies there. And so I think this is a game, if you're Miami, you're going to test them. And I think you're going to be able to put up some yardage. I think for Wake Forest, it's definitely a game of, okay, cool, they're going to put up some yards. Can we avoid that 35+ yard backbreaker that we were giving up in the first half of the season?
Before we get you out of here, Cam, and let the people know where they can find your amazing work, give me your 3 keys for Wake Forest to be able to win this football game.
Number one, I mean, take care of what you can control. You've got to limit the penalties. You've got to limit the turnovers. This was already going to be a game, health, whatever, out the window. This was already going to be a game that you needed to play close to perfect in to win. And so you can't sit here and get down to the 24, to the 18, to the 16, and have an illegal man downfield. You can't have a drop ball. You can't have a receiver run the wrong route, and then the quarterback throws to what he knows is the wrong route and throws an interception. You can't have those types of mistakes. And I think the first two are probably going to be on offense, even though I think defense is still be important. So I think you can't make those mistakes. And secondly, on the other end of that side, you've got to be able to punch the ball into the end zone. The Wake's done a better job the last couple of games of not settling for field goals, but this is a game that you can't trade 7 for 3. You can't do it in any game, but you especially can't get into. You don't want to be in a game with a front like this. That's whether or not their pass rush, their secondary has been not the best. You can't get into a game where Ruben Bain can just pin his ears back and just go at you. You've got to make this one a game where it's going to be close, and you've got to put some score pressure on Miami. And then defensively, you've got to just limit how much the mistakes are. You're not going to stop Cam Ward. Cam Ward's a Houdini artist. He's going to do some stuff to you that you're just going to be really pissed off at the end of the day. You're going to watch film next day, and Lambert's going to have his little pen and be like, what happened here? And you're like, I don't know what you want me to do about that. But the one thing you can control is you can control your communication breakdowns in the back end. You can control that. If someone beats you with a ball in the air, I'm still upset, but I'm less upset about that. What I'm more upset and what you can't do is, someone's coming across the formation and you're expecting the wide corner to come across and take that. No, you're on the outside. Just trade that off. You take that. And that was something that happened in Louisiana. They had that. No one passed it off. Wow, someone's running wide open. You can't have a little man match like structure and no one ends up getting a guy out of the slot and you say, oh no, I thought the high safety who's on the left hash is going to take that. No, he's not going to be able to make it 50 yards across the field. You're not going to come out of this with a shutout. That's just not going to happen. But you also know that you have some advantages here. Just can you hold them to a field goal every now and then? Can you get a turnover? But you can't just let them have the easy layups on offense. They're going to get some, and that's fine. They're very talented. Don't just hand it to them.
You made some great, excellent points for how Wake Forest could win this game, because I think all the points you made on defense for Wake Forest is the exact same things that I think are screaming about our defense as well, especially the word communication, right? I think almost every staff member and fan has kind of overused that word the last couple of weeks, even after the buys, just to be able to communicate better. And to your point, I mean, you talk about Wake Forest wanting to go from 3 to 7 in that red zone. Well, lucky enough, they're playing a team in Miami that has allowed 28 total touchdowns this year. And out of those 28, 18 have actually been in the red zone. So we are a team that really needs to pick it up when it comes to that aspect and not allowing teams to get 7 points in that red zone. So it's going to be very interesting. But again, Cam, thank you so much for breaking down the Wake Forest matchup this weekend, and best of luck to you guys in the Demon Deacons. But before we let you out of here, go ahead and let the fans know where they can find your amazing work.
Yeah. You can find me over at DemonDecanDigest, part of the 24/7 Sports Network. I'm over there writing on message boards all the time. You can also find me at Cam Lemons _ on Twitter, and then at Cam Lemons just regular on Blue Sky. I'm on both. I'm using both, so I'll be there.
Awesome, Cam. Appreciate you guys so much, and make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe button. This is the CanesWear Daily Podcast, only on FTSN.